Welcome back to another episode of Not a Strong Start, a podcast by filmmakers who talk movies, television, and always ready to wrap it up. I'm your host, Physician Ruination.
I am not your host, and I am who?
And I'm your other guy, Victor Von. Don't do it.
Javon, don't do it. That's exactly how I saw it. I saw your name. I was like, that's how I was seeing it. That's perfect. So in this episode, we want to discuss about the big news. They announced it in Comic-Con. We saw the whole MCU news. They finally cast Dr. Doom. So what's your guys' initial reaction to that? As soon as you guys saw it, like, they're okay. First, who did you guys think it was going to be? Let's start off there before we get to our reaction. Who do you guys think it was going to be? So, George?
I thought it was going to be the fan favorite, which had been Killian Murphy. Everyone's been talking about Killian Murphy for Dr. Doom. He just had a huge success with Oppenheimer. It seemed like the obvious choice, honestly.
I'll be honest, I wasn't thinking that they were going to reveal my casting at Comic-Con. Like I knew we were going to get
Yeah.
stuff. I wasn't thinking we were going to get that. So I wasn't going in being like, "Oh, who's going to be Dr. Doom?" Stuff. So then I just found out who was casted. So I never had that time to be like, "Oh, who's it going to be? Who's under the mask or anything?" I just found out.
Yeah, and it feels like the shift changed real quick. I know we're going to get into it, about the shift going from Kang to Doctor Doom, but they didn't really it wasn't like a thing that they built up for a couple years, right? Where it's like we knew Doctor Doom was like the end game. It felt like it was a quick, we need a pivot. We need a pivot. And then I guess rather than focusing on the controversy, they quickly gave us a casting so that way we had something else to talk about. That's kind of what it felt like a little bit to me. So I heard Killian Murphy. I think he would be amazing for it. Obviously, they didn't go that direction with it. So I don't know if it's maybe him not wanting to do a Marvel movie. I mean, who knows, right? Maybe the actor just didn't want to do it. So it sounds like they're playing Robert Downey Jr. a ton of money. So like I get it. So my first reaction to seeing that was like, it was like kind of deflating because it was like we just got this incredible, end scene with Tony Stark, and now you're giving us Robert Downey Jr., which even with them rehiring the Russo brothers to do these two Avenger movies, we know that this is Marvel's best opportunity. Like, they went all out to give us an A effort. It's them acknowledging the fact that they've been giving us subpar content, which I appreciate. They're going back to their aces. The problem with that, though, it tells us how desperate they are and that they know it was a complete failure what they've been doing with their last two phases, essentially, where like they knew we don't have an option but to go back to that old well. That's scary because eventually this era is going to stop. What else do you have? And they've been kind of messing around with the stories and the characters so much in these last two phases. You can't undo what you've done. So even when you bring it back, it feels like a very modified version of it. But let me jump to you guys. What was your guys' initial reaction? So Jose, start us off.
I mean, you basically took everything I was going to say word for word. Like
I read your
literally
notes. I read your
word for
notes.
word. I even had the well comment in there.
Well,
I was like,
You hacking
yeah.
son of a bitch.
Yeah. Woo.
So, my first reaction was conflicted. Part of me was more Robert Downey Jr. Like, great. I like Robert Downey Jr.
Mhm.
Then the other part of me was just more like this. This feels like desperation move rather than a well laid plan move. And a lot of times, especially when it comes to movies that are part of a bigger piece, we've seen in the past that if you don't have a well laid out plan, it can collapse very easily, aka Star Wars. In there, so you need to have a blueprint. This doesn't seem like a blueprint move. Like you said, it seems like a pivot. It just seemed like it was the easiest solution to try to recover quickly. And probably, DC's new universe is on the horizon coming out next year. And that might be successful, that might not be successful. But if you're looking at it in their shoes, they're going in the wrong direction. They can't risk DC all of a sudden coming off the gates hot and everything starts doing well while they're going in the opposite direction. So what better time to just do a desperation pivot, go the easy route, and just bring out names that people are going to attach to try to, mitigate what next year may look like. So at times going back to the well works. Many times it doesn't, so we'll have to see.
This feels like putting a band-aid on an earthquake, if you ask me.
And that does not work. Trust me.
It
We tried.
doesn't?
We all live in California at some point or another. It just doesn't work, guys.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's definitely stunt casting as far as I'm concerned. I do feel like it's a temporary thing. I don't think this is a thing that's going to be going long game as how Iron Man was. But at the same time, it's not a good precedent because they've already tried something like this, and as of right now, for the fandom, it hasn't been proving to work well. And that example is John Krasinski as Reed Richards in Multiverse of Madness. The fans were excited. They loved it. They're like, this is the guy we wanted. You're doing it. Awesome. And they killed him, and now they've put Pedro Pascal, not Pedro, for anyone who says that online. It's not Pedro, it's Pedro Pascal. All right. He's now going to be Reed Richards. And the fandom has been kind of very divisive and mixed on this. I'm interested to see what he's going to do with it because he's an amazing actor and he's definitely paid his dues, deserves to be where he's at right now. But it's an interesting choice. I can't deny that. You know, he doesn't necessarily have the look of Richards. He hasn't shown that kind of character as of yet. So it's kind of an odd thing. And granted, they were like, it's a multiverse. It's a different version of him, you know, and we didn't get to see enough of Krasinski to him even develop that character. So there's good arguments there, but the fandom is already not liking that. So what I think is going to happen here is we got him as Doctor Doom, which they did state in the announcement that he is playing Victor Von Doom. This is not Tony Stark as a version of Doctor Doom. He is Doctor Doom, the guy that we know him to be. I think it's just going to be a variant version. And then later on, we might, who knows, we might still get Killian Murphy as Doctor Doom, as the 616 Doctor Doom. But this is just the way that we should be introducing him. I don't know.
Yeah, it feels like that as well. And I know that that's a big rumor that's going around, is that it's a variant of Tony Stark, you know, in this other alternate version. But like you said, they mentioned that it's Victor Von Doom. So if that's the version that they're going with, it seems weird that you're giving us a temporary version of a character just to give us the permanent version later. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And it kind of feels, I don't want to use the word phony, but there's something weird about how they introduce this. It doesn't feel natural. It feels forced. It really feels like they're trying to distract us from something else. I don't know. Like it's kind of sitting funny with me. And I love Robert Downey Jr. Like he's gonna kill the role, but it's really weird. It's really strange how they approach this. And like you mentioned with you know, with Pedro, like how when he got cast in this, I see a lot of people that are saying, you know, he doesn't look like him, he doesn't do this. I originally thought with Krasinski, I thought maybe he's too old and they wanted somebody younger, somebody that can help build and ride this franchise for like the 15 years of Fantastic Four, something like that in mind. Like, what's the age difference between him and
He's almost 50 years old,
Krasinski?
isn't he?
That's what I'm saying. Like, they're
Yeah.
probably the same age, like, or at least pretty close. Or Krasinski might even be younger. Like, I don't know. So I don't understand why we didn't get that version, but it's also like what we saw, you know, spoiler alert for those that haven't seen, you know, Deadpool and Wolverine. But just like we saw Henry Cavill, you know, where we finally saw like that little dream casting, you know, as Wolverine. It's like, are we gonna see, are we really gonna get that version of him? Probably not. Or even how we saw, you know, Channing Tatum with Gambit.
You know how long I've been waiting for this? Woo, I'm about to make a name for myself, yeah.
I don't think you guys walk away from this.
You just make sure people know what happened here today.
Are we really going to see these standalone movies, or is it just like a little bit of them giving us, you know, us fanboys, like, hey, you know,
Fan
here's a little bit of,
service.
yeah, it feels like fan service.
It is.
The way that they announced him makes it seem like it's more than just fan service. But there's no way, even with his current age and as much attention he gave to this, you need someone that's going to play Doctor Doom for at least 4 movies, in my opinion, because he's such a great character. And there's so many things you can do with his character and how he bleeds through other franchises and other characters in the MCU. He doesn't have to be stuck to just Fantastic Four. I really hope they don't do that.
Bro, you're not paying Robert Downey Jr. $80 million for temporary fan service.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
more than that. The Russo
Yes,
brothers are
more
getting
than 80
$80 million for the 2 films. He's getting
Yeah.
paid more than them.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're not doing that for temporary fan service. Krasinski, Channing Tatum, they're not even touching that
Yeah.
in their appearances and stuff. You're paying that amount of money, he's gonna be a big part, and I don't think it's just temporary.
Well, you gotta
Yeah.
think he has at least possibly 3 films that he'll be
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
So that's still that you can get paid a lot of money for 3
That's
films.
probably a span of 6-7 movies.
Yeah.
I mean, 6 or 7 years. That's probably a span of 6 or
Yeah.
7 years.
It's actually about 3 years. So from the release dates that they have marked right now, Fantastic Four is coming out in 2025.
Mhm.
And then the Avengers comes out in 2026. That's the Doomsday one. And then
Mhm.
2027 will be Secret Wars.
Yeah,
It's not a lot.
I see that changing the time frame. Look at it
It
this way:
has to.
Superman Legacy comes out next year. Just wrapped up filming. Fantastic Four just started filming and it's supposed to come out around the same time as Superman Legacy.
Mhm.
Like, you're gonna have to really rush it to hit that timestamp.
Which we've seen
Yeah.
MCU do,
They've done it, yeah.
but it's always done it with bad VFX that we've seen, right? We
Yeah.
haven't seen them rush it, and the VFX looks amazing, right? That's why there's always a joke about how they have like the VFX artists just sitting there working in like 28-hour shifts a day, right? Like they're just keeping, they don't let them outside for breathing. They don't feed them, like they're just stuck slaving away on the stuff. But that's a good point, Jose. So the fact that we're going with that, but I was really happy with where Robert Downey Jr. was, where he did Iron Man. He gave it so much more heart and love than anybody anticipated before we saw Iron Man 1, because there was always that idea of what a comic book movie was, right? Like it wasn't deep, it wasn't complex, it was very simplified. And he took the character and added real acting, real emotion to this character. So it really broadened the idea of what a comic book movie can do. Then when he did Oppenheimer, it was like, yes, like I wanted to see him really start diving into these great acting roles, start chasing some, some more Oscars. Like let's see this last version, this last lap of Robert Downey Jr. Like let's see what he does with his career. I don't want to see him go back to comic books again. I mean, as great as he was in that, I'm more excited to see what else he can do, because what is he going to do new with Doctor Doom that you felt you need to see from him in the comic book world that he couldn't really do with Tony Stark? Not saying we're going to have fun with it and he's going to add some cool little wrinkles and stuff, but I'm more intrigued by some stuff I haven't seen him do yet.
I mean, in all fairness, Doctor Doom is a complex character.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's lots of things he could do with it that could
Yeah.
differ from
Mhm.
Tony, I think, in a big way, because he could be the dark version of what Tony could have been.
Yeah.
Think of like if Tony had succeeded in Age of Ultron, what
Mhm.
path would that have led him down? Maybe he could have become a Doctor Doom type where he's just a dictator of the world. And I think that's what this could be, is something similar to that. For me, that the issue is, as a film viewer, the regular moviegoer doesn't read comic books, so they're not really privy to this world of the multiverse like a comic book reader is, or someone who, let's say, grew up watching Star Trek or something to that extent.
Mhm.
They're a little bit more grounded, and when they see this face for 10 years as this one character, it's hard for someone to just separate that and then see them as a totally new character. Like, this would be the equivalent of watching Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker for so many years, and then we're gonna have a new Star Wars, and guess what? Now he's gonna be Darth Vader. It's like, wait, what? He's not Darth Vader. He's Luke Skywalker. They're not gonna be able to separate that, even with a mask. It's just in their heads, like, no, he's Luke. That's it. At this point, he is Iron Man. I think even if they put a mask on him, and if the mask comes off and they see a deformed face, they see Robert Downey Jr. no matter what. It's really hard to just put those two apart.
Robert Downey Jr.'s, and it might be a situation where he got out, started doing his own thing, waited until he got a role, that he got his recognition, got his Oscar recognition, all of that. He completed that, and then now is like, okay, I accomplished that goal. Now this is a bag. It's really hard to turn down right now. So it's like, okay, I met my goal that I wanted. I did it. So now let's go back. It's kind of like when Will Smith got away from those action comedies because you could tell he really wanted that award. And it took a long time to finally get there. I believe if he would have gotten it earlier, we probably would have gotten to the Bad Boys again sooner, and he would have gone back to those type of movies that brought him the money.
Yeah, I agree with that. So let me ask you guys this question. The first 20 years, let's say, Marvel could do no wrong. Everything they released, everything that they were bringing on, like they were knocking it out of the park, man. Like they had such a high success track record And then once Endgame happened, they're just tripping over their feet. They're fumbling so hard. What happened? Like, what happened to the point where they got so desperate where they felt, well, we need Robert Downey Jr. They were having so many successes without Robert Downey Jr. as well. Like, everything was hitting for the most part. Sure, there's always the, anomalies where sometimes you have one that, you have a Captain Marvel or something like that. Sure. But you know what I mean? For the most part, they were hitting. Is it a matter of Kevin Feige just getting distracted, getting bored? Is it the people behind it getting bored? Like, what happened? It couldn't have just been the new director and the creators they brought on board, because all the ones that they had before were still crushing it.
I think they just Krispy Kremed it. Anyway,
Don't we all?
yeah, they tried to expand and do too much in too little of a time. They were like, let's put out 10 TV shows a week. Let's put out 10 TV shows a year. Let's put out, another 8 movies on top of that. They were trying to put out, anywhere from 20 to 30 projects a year. So I think it's a matter of they wore themselves thin. You wore, the people behind the scenes thin, especially the people in charge of like the visual effects. You're wearing them down. Even Kevin Feige, reports came out and things like that, that there was some projects that he wasn't even able to oversee on like in the past. So things were being put out and going through without really his eyes or his seal of approval for the Daredevil show, where they had to kind of reset and restart. He didn't have eyes on it. And then finally, when they got eyes on it, they're like, this doesn't work. Like, you need to restart. So with you're only one person. And, if you start trying to do too much quantity over quality, there's going to be holes, there's going to be consistency issues, all of that. And I think that's what happened.
I think it was definitely a tag team effect of what you just said, everything of that. And also, people might not want to hear it, but some of the DEI aspects to it have messed with it a bit. You have people who are the casual fan to the hardcore fan who know these characters through and through. Even if you didn't read the comic books, you may have watched a cartoon, you may have played a video game. These characters were seen in a certain visual way, and when you change them just for the sake of just having a person of color or a person of a certain sex, and then that storyline revolves around that change, you've now lost the point of that character. And I think that's killed it for a lot of these stories. The stories in the beginning, Dan, you're saying like they were successful even without Robert Downey Jr. Why? It's because the story was still good. The story was still compelling enough that's like, well, I can see myself going through any of their journeys. Like Thor. Thor on paper, yes, he's visually a blonde white guy. Okay, but you could still relate with this guy who's dealing with the struggles of an empire, or not even an empire, but responsibility. We all have responsibility in our life and have to tackle that. And he's been successful all this time, so I'll be able to do it. But then you have the brother who feels like he could be worthy, but he's not getting that light. I have a little brother. He sometimes feels like that. We've definitely had a Thor Loki relationship. We're not gods. You don't have to be these characters to relate to them. But there's this narrative now where it's like, well, if I don't actually look like the character, then how can I relate? How can I see myself? And that's not how you should be telling a story. It should always just be like from an internal character level. And I think they're going to get back to that now. I think Feige is realizing like that's what worked before. We gotta get back to the drawing board and what worked.
Yeah, and I think there's two more things to add on top of what you guys said. One of them is you also kind of blew your load a little bit with these with the high level characters. So even people that don't really read comic books, they know who Thor is. They know who, for the most part, they know who Iron Man is. You're now starting to go into these secondary characters that just aren't as compelling or interesting, and it's not really grabbing as much, right? So it's like when you're not dealing with like the Hulks or whatnot or the Iron Mans, they're now trying to feed us Captain Marvel as being what as supposed to be one of the the heavy
Strongest
hitters,
Avengers.
the strongest Avengers, but then you're surrounding her with two characters that like people just don't care that much about, right? Loki was great in his role as like a secondary character, great as a villain, and all of a sudden he's having to champion and carry very story A plot lines, even though his show has been good. Like, I'm not knocking that, but I'm just saying the level of what's being your star talent versus your B talent, their B talent is now having to step into the A talent, and maybe they're just not as compelling. The second thing I want to say too is for the average viewer, the average moviegoer that's maybe not so into the comics, like you said, George, all these alternate storylines and timelines are getting so complicated that they're just getting completely lost in the field. When you review the first, when we talk about Earth 616, it was a very just linear like story. Like there wasn't all these complications. They added a little bit of wrinkles with Loki's, and where they started giving us a little bit of alternate timelines, it felt like things were going good. Then they just started overcomplicating. It's become so complicated now. So even to the point when they announce Robert Downey Jr. taking over as Doctor Doom, we're over here arguing about what variant is it and what Earth is it going to be on it. And this is us knowing this stuff. You think Sally Jane in Oklahoma is going to know what the hell this is? She's just in the watch like, I don't know what I'm watching anymore. So even if they're sitting here watching Deadpool and Wolverine, not to go too deep into that movie, but like, oh my God, how many conversations they have to have about exposition of the character explaining to the audience what's happening. So it's like, that's where they're at now. So for somebody that maybe didn't watch that movie, you don't know what's going on. So when they're announcing Robert Downey Jr., somebody that's more like a casual fan is watching saying, didn't he just die in Endgame? Like, how is he a bad guy? How is he alive again? Because they don't understand it's another plan, another alternate timeline, it's another version, it's another character. They don't understand these things. And it's like, that's another disconnect.
I would say the red flags were there when they said a couple of years ago that they wanted to use the TV shows to fill in the blanks and supplement the movies. So right there, that was the red flag. It was like, okay, so you're telling me this movie will not work unless I'm forcing myself to watch this other thing that's going to be 10 to 12 hours. That was a red flag right there.
There's also some hubris here on the side of Feige and the team, because Dan, you just mentioned that they blew their load with all these big characters, but the reality is these big characters weren't big at all. Like in the comic book world, Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, Avengers, they're the worst selling comic books. At least within that time, and even to some extent now. The big books that they always had were X-Men, Spider-Man. X-Men, Spider-Man within like the 80s into the 90s, huge sellers. Both of those books sold into the millions, which you haven't seen them since. But they didn't have the rights to them. So it's like, well, I guess we have to do a movie with the guys we have. And they made it work. And they're like, well, if we can make these guys work, then we can make Guardians of the Galaxy work. We made those guys work. No one buys those books. Okay, like what else can we make work? They felt like they could do no wrong. That's why they started whipping up these characters that no one was reading. And now that those are friends, they're like, oh crap, what have we done? Like,
Yeah, they overdid it.
Yeah. Which now what they should be focusing on, which they're going to be, is Spider-Man and X-Men. Like, give us a
Fantastic
honestly,
Four.
forget everything that's happening now. Just focus on those characters, and let that be the stepping stone for the next thing.
And it felt like, and I know they'll get to it, but it felt like they're setting us up for X-Men versus Avengers, right? Like everybody wants to see this, and maybe they didn't want to announce it too soon. But if you're already announcing Doctor Doom when we haven't even gotten Fantastic Four, you could really still announce X-Men versus Avengers here. Like, there's really no difference here. And you could sit there and think, well, maybe Marvel doesn't want to show us X-Men yet because we kind of want you to forget about the Fox version.
Yeah.
Yes, but you keep bringing it into our faces with Deadpool and all that. So, like, you're not letting us forget about it. So, I don't know. I don't know.
But in a way, the Deadpool Wolverine serves as a bookend, as a goodbye to that world.
Yeah.
So
it does.
hopefully that should be the end of that for the most part.
The thing that sucks is we saw Beast in the Marvels. Like we saw the Kelsey Grammer Beast in the Marvels.
That's what I'm saying.
Just trash
so
the Marvels.
Yeah, but to your point, George, I'm glad you mentioned that because it's blurring the line of like, this is why we look at Marvel and say, what are you doing? Because you're blending ideas and you're placing them into franchise to make us, you're telling us that that they exist in this, and then you're trying to wipe it clean elsewhere where we can tell you're doing damage control. So now the integrity of the storyline that you're telling us is now compromised. I never felt that in the first 20 years that they were doing this. It feels like they're doing so much retconning now, and they're trying to clean so much that like it just feels muddled. It's like I don't cherish it as much as I used to because it's so freaking obvious that they're and that they're screwing up. Like, it's so obvious that they're trying to like do rewrites now, and it's just like, what is happening? So, of course, let's talk about our pivot from Kang.
Pivot!
Right? I'm happy that they pivoted.
Pivot!
I wasn't liking the Kang character of what they were showing us. He seemed weak, kind of. That's why I always thought, why isn't it Doctor Doom? You know what I mean? Like, why isn't it Doctor Doom? I'm glad they're going there. It just sucks that it took this and a controversy to get us there. It cheapens the angle that we're going for Doctor Doom because it didn't feel organic.
Yeah, with Doctor Doom with the pivot,
Pivot!
I actually do not mind it at all. I feel like you have to cut your losses with that. And this has nothing to do with Majors. I'm speaking
Yeah.
just based on story. He did a good job with what he was given, and his talent and versatility did show, in certain parts when it came to Kang. Honestly, I just don't believe Disney properly positioned Kang as a big bad. They overexposed them, seeing the versions of him getting defeated, especially one version being beaten by ants. It just took the oomph out of the character for
No
me.
good villain ever gets defeated by ants. Listeners, prove me wrong. Show me in the comments because I have not seen one.
Yeah, and like I know there's different variants, and you can defeat one, and a stronger one can come. But while this is all based off comics, this isn't comics. And George touched on that a little bit earlier today. This isn't comic books. This is the movies. You know, I feel that concept just doesn't work long term on screen, where you have a more limited output for storytelling, unlike comics that release nonstop. They're releasing year round, year after year after year. They're the telenovelas of books.
Exactly.
We're never going to get rid of them. So you don't have that leeway that you have with comics to introduce all of these strings and all of that aspect. So you have to kind of pick and choose how you're going to present things. Look at Thanos. They gave us bits and pieces here and there. They let our anticipation build while showing how other bads feared him. So that already started elevating him in the pedestal, where we see our bad for Avengers Loki, and we see like, oh crap, Loki's a little intimidated by this guy. And we saw all the damage Loki can do. So that's already like elevating him. And then when it was finally time for him to be front and center in the story, he came off as an unstoppable force. And we believed it because of the way he was set up. That wasn't there for Kang. Not only did we see so much Kang, but we just saw different versions of him getting their ass beat. So as a consumer, especially the general audience who doesn't know about all these versions of Kangs, they're just seeing Kang getting his ass whooped. They're like, oh, okay, well, he comes back again. They'll just whoop his ass again. So it just didn't work. So I feel this pivot is the best thing that they've done after Endgame, regardless of them going to Robert Downey Jr. and that change and how you feel about that casting. The change away from Kang was the right move, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's pretty much the general consensus from everybody. I haven't heard anyone being like, "No, not my Kang." Oh, if anything, people who love the character are just disappointed that he got treated so poorly.
Yeah.
That's the only outcry I've been seeing from anyone. He could have been such a good character too. I thought the casting wasn't that bad, and I thought like visually he looked really good. He had a good backstory, but they depowered him so much that it's just like, well, even I felt that was just like, yeah, there's 1,000 more Kangs, but do I care now? Because the Kang that they presented in Ant-Man, that felt like the one that we should have been seeing go through the whole situation, like through all the movies coming forward. Like they should have showed us maybe some other weaker Kang that wasn't as prevalent. Like he did such a good job acting in that role. That's like, all right, I want to see more of this guy. And then that ending, I was like, well, okay, I guess I won't. And now I don't care, because when I saw all the other variants, I was like, you guys look like cartoon characters. I don't, and granted, yes, it comes from a comic book, so they should be cartoon. But to that same extent, like when I would read Kang in the comic books, I never took the other Kangs seriously. You know, when I see Pharaoh Kang, I'm just like, yeah, well, you're nothing. You're nothing
Yeah.
compared to regular Kang. Like Prime Kang, he's the guy. You know. I also feel like they missed an opportunity because he's tied to the Fantastic Four also. Like he's a descendant of Reed Richards. He's directly tied to Mr. Fantastic. And that was just like another thing where like, you just fumbled on something that could have been really good, you know, to set up the family of the Marvel universe. It's just like whatever. Like I'm at a place now where like, yeah, let's just forget that happened. And honestly, I think Loki season 2 kind of wrapped that whole thing up anyway. So
Yeah.
it's like
Agreed.
if I never
I
hear
do
from it
too.
again, I'm okay. I don't need like
Yeah.
an extra scene, you know, explaining like what happened to the other Kangs. We're good. Loki's in his
Yeah.
tree chair and he's cutting up some stuff to make sure that we're okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the other Kangs are like, ooh, I don't know. They got some ants backing them up. Maybe we just don't interfere,
Yeah.
and they just go live on their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd
And
be cool if like if they do show the Kangs again, just to show how powerful Doctor Doom is. Maybe Doctor Doom just wipes them all out. You know,
yeah.
like I'd be
Okay,
cool just to show how powerful he is.
Yeah.
Like he just like in a snap per se, just
Yeah.
takes out like 100 Kangs. This
the
is
whole
like, oh, who's this
council.
Doctor Doom guy? You know?
Yeah, which would be really cool, but that's the thing. Jonathan Majors, he's a great actor, and we've seen him play a phenomenal villain.
Yeah,
Like he has been badass. That's why I hated the way that they all those different variants of King that they're showing us. And like you said, they felt so weak. They felt so cartoonish. They felt zany, like the way they're just kind of jumping around. Some are just like
yeah,
idiots. I even said like Galactus, right? If you gave us Galactus as like a big bad, whatever it is, it's such a physically big, giant, imposing thing that I can understand right away if you show me something that massive. Let's say you set him up in Fantastic Four. Let's say he proves that he's hard to defeat. They can't defeat him. He's trying to take over the world, and now it bleeds over to Avengers. Enough said. I see a giant celestial creature that's sitting here trying to consume the earth. That looks like that's going to take the entire planet of heroes to go and try to destroy it. That I can see that. You know what I mean? It's like when you have something physical like that, like it tells you how powerful they can be. Or like you said, Doctor Doom comes in and just wipes them out. You can show us very quickly how powerful this person is. It's enough for me to see. With Kang, it felt like they were more telling us than they were ever actually showing us. That was a problem.
well, then you might be excited for Fantastic Four because Galactus will be in it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But
And
I hope
he's not a shit cloud either. He's actually Galactus.
yes, exactly. That's why
He's-
exactly. That's why I hope he doesn't end there. Like I hope there's more of this. I hope it bleeds to Silver Surfer. Like I want to see the more of the cosmic hero stuff. Like I want to see more of those storylines happening as well, but we'll see. All right, so based off of what we talked about, what are some of the theories you guys think that they're going to do with this Doctor Doom character? Like, do you think it's just going to be exactly what they told us, or do you think they threw a couple of little wrinkles in there?
Look at these wrinkles.
I mean, I'm sure we're gonna get wrinkles. I mean, there's different ways it can play out. George kind of touched on it earlier, similar kind of to what I was thinking is,
Hmm.
it might be a character that's not far off of kind of like the Tony Stark that we did that, who created Ultron, because of his obsession of keeping the world safe. So, we can get that with this character with Victor, where basically, develops that stronger God complex, leading him to, becoming Doctor Doom. His actions just being driven by for the good of everyone, even if they don't see it. Aspect. And then there could be a few triggers that cause that. I mean, it could be revolving around the incursions that they've kind of touched on here and there, which are ending worlds. So it could be that, or it could be maybe universes on the path of destruction because of the anchors, losing anchors, which got introduced in Deadpool Wolverine. But see it playing out as a character that's in his mind doing what's best and trying to save
Hmm.
everyone. Maybe not even just his Earth, but the entire universe and all the multiverse.
Which is exactly what happens in the Secret Wars from the 2015 version. Is there was all these incursions, the multiverses were colliding, and in a last attempt to save everything, Doctor Doom takes all of the power of the Beyonders and such, and then he becomes the most omnipotent being in the multiverse, and he just combines everything into one world, and he's the god of the world. Like he just oversees everything. He's so powerful that he's made Sue Storm his wife, which is what he's always wanted. They have kids, and Reed Richards is off trying to do whatever he can to save the world. Uh,
Try to be relevant.
Yeah, and I could see them kind of going somewhere within that realm because they've already started playing with it. So I think that's going to be somewhat of the storyline. The only thing that sucks is just that like the comic books had all those years to build up Doctor Doom and his relationship with the Fantastic Four and the other superheroes, that you really feel the weight of that decision and what he's doing. Like to some extent, he's actually trying to be a good guy, and he's not trying to be bad. It's just as the superhero is trying to hard not to see him as a bad guy when this is what he's done. So if they do something like that, I just don't know if it's going to have the weight that we need it to have. I know comic book readers like myself are going to say, it's like, oh, well, Tony Stark has been Doctor Doom before because of that what if issue where they switched places and Doctor Doom became Tony Stark and Tony Stark became Doctor Doom and this whole bull crap. There's so many different versions. I mean, in the most current iteration of Iron Man, like in the regular canon, at one point Doctor Doom is actually helping out Iron Man in the Avengers, and he becomes Iron Man for a hot second. So it's like there's so many different like storylines you can go with here. It's just the reality and canon. That's just not who they are.
It's like, despite what they're saying, I think the only way to really salvage this is that it has to be a variant version of Tony Stark. Now, maybe he was adopted, maybe he took another name, maybe he took another something. You have to go that direction. It can't just be Tony Stark looked just like Robert Downey Jr. and now here's Victor that looks just like Robert Downey Jr. The characters just happen to look exactly the same, but they're entirely different characters. I don't think Marvel could play it that way. Like, you have to go with some kind of version or variant of something. I just think you have to. You have to in order to salvage it and say, oh, then that makes perfect sense with the casting. Like,
I mean, one thing that maybe it can work. So if we bring him in, I know Galactus is for Fantastic Four. He's gonna be a big bad. But if this Victor Van Doom is part of that world at that point, and we see some kind of appearance where after the whatever happens with Galactus there, you know, triggers him to be like, oh, kind of like what the Invasion Avengers did for Tony Stark, where he was like, after they got invaded, he was like, I need to be proactive. I need to do something to stop this. Where the Galactus kind of triggers that for that Victor character. And then that's the one that we get here. And he does look the same, but to him, he has no connection with these characters. But characters like Spider-Man, who has that deep connection with Tony Stark, he's just going to see the face. So it's going to be that one-sided of like, I feel something, I have a connection, and he's like, I don't know who the hell you are, kid. That aspect. So then that creates an emotional dynamic there. And then we've already introduced him before to kind of get his motivation in the Fantastic Four movie.
Okay. So last question before I close this out. Real quick, very quickly, don't go into too much detail. Are you now way more excited with the direction of Marvel than you were about a year ago?
Yeah.
No.
I'm not super excited, but more excited.
I'm more excited now too. I understand it's a lot of redo, but hey, it's better than what we were promised before, so I'll take it.
Yeah, I'm not more excited. I need proof that it's going to work. And Deadpool Wolverine 100%. Is not enough to prove that's going to work yet.
I agree. All right, so thank you for watching another episode of Not a Strong Start. Please like, subscribe, comment, share on the YouTube channel Not a Strong Start. You can listen to us anywhere you listen to your podcast. Follow us on Instagram at Twitter, Not a Strong Start. I'm your host, Physician Ruination. Follow me at King_Sangre.
And I am not your host, and you can find me at This Is Me Nombre on Instagram.
And I'm your other guy, Victor Vaughn. Don't do it. And you can find me at
Don't do
Nicolapolis.
it.